Hey, Linda, how are you doing this week?
Hi, I'm fine given the times we're in. I think we should go ahead and tell our folks what we're going to be dealing with because they might be surprised.
Well, since every morning I rewrite this because I'm surprised, that wouldn't be too unusual. We're going to talk a little bit about the economy. A number of things have come up in the last week or so that are, I think, important or at least need to be mentioned. But of course, as they used to say, this is the War and Peace report as well, so I'm sure we have to talk about the mess that's going on in the on and off war of the U.S. versus Iran. And there's some good electoral news in Hungary. Trump lost another election there, which is always pleasing. And you've got some really interesting stuff here.
Well, I thought I would talk about this new word that's sweeping the world called Enshittification and what it is. You and I both want to take a quick look at the Iranians' use of Lego figures for propaganda. I'm still interested in whose God is on our side, so we're going to go to part 2 on that. And then if we have time, would like to introduce the best headline ever.
Okay. Are we going to save that for a surprise?
That's a surprise.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big surprise. Okay, so let's start with the scary news that you want to present us with.
Yeah, there was an unusual meeting this week. This happens on important occasions, but not frequently. The Secretary of the Treasury and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve Board met with CEOs of the large money center banks. The New York Times reports that the leaders of some of America's largest banks were warned by top government officials this week about a new artificial intelligence model from Anthropic that could heighten the risk of cyber attacks, according to 3 people briefed on the matter, but not permitted to speak. Elsewhere in practically footnotes in the financial press, concern apparently was also raised about the fact that all these banks are using exactly the same artificial intelligence product, which would mean that whatever is coming out of that would be coming out at all of the banks simultaneously and possibly acting at the same time.
Okay, so let's say, just as an example, I want to purchase soybean futures.
Okay.
And I get ready to enter that buy, but everybody else is on the same software. What happens?
You could crash the market.
Oh, okay.
In other words, there would be all buyers but no sellers. There'd be all sellers but no buyers. This would be like coordinating all the bank's activities at the same time in the same way. It's going to create instability, tendencies towards large fluctuations if they don't plan for this. So it's kind of a warning, but it's kind of scary because even the people who are creating this AI don't know quite what it's going to do. It's just a large probabilistic modeling.
Well, were they meeting to decide what to do about it?
I think they were just trying to give them a warning, but of course we don't regulate these things anymore, so it's like, well, guys, be careful, don't destroy the world, or the economy. If AI is being used by all of these banks at the same time to manage risk or to make decisions about whether to give loans or not give loans at a current interest rate, or whether to move from funding, construction loans versus retail expansion loans or any other kind of loan, since nobody knows what the algorithm is or what information it's going to go out and get and make that decision, then they won't know how it made the decision, but they're all acting on it independently. There's no mix of judgments coming out of it. This algorithm just it's a plagiarism machine. It just repeats what it's got in other place. And it always chooses the most common, right? I mean, it doesn't even pay attention to what the content is. It says, when this mark shows up, what's the highest probability mark that follows it? It doesn't even know words.
This could vastly distort the financial markets in banks all at once.
Well, in this case, in these particularly important banks, if they're all doing exactly the same thing at the same time, then there's, transactions that are one-sided. When there were people who were betting against the mortgage-backed securities
Yes.
in the great financial crisis. And that's because some people thought they were good and some people thought they were bad. And those people who thought they were bad had to keep refunding, had to keep getting their funding fixed because everybody else was thinking these things were going up. Now, when it crashed, they won big, right?
Yes.
But notice there were people who were betting for it and people who were betting against it. In a market like that, if everybody at the same time decides to buy against it, the market collapses, right? That would be the home mortgage market
I get it.
of the world.
Okay.
Or, So it has the potential to magnify the variations, the fluctuations in market activities, and make them uniform. Everything goes up or everything goes down.
Oh, I see. Oh, boy. So is it...
And nobody knows how this works, which is why it's a warning.
So the problem is that all the major banks are buying into the same AI platform.
Yeah. I mean, that's why they got them together to warn them about Anthropic.
Well, it sounds like something more than a warning might be needed.
Welcome to free enterprise and unregulated banking. I have to say, this is a very confusing topic, and it caught my attention because so few outlets mentioned this particular thing, and they were all focused on the cybersecurity issue, which
I see.
Those could be related.
Yeah.
I mean, if some cybersecurity threat appeared, it could appear at all places at the same time if they're all using the same model.
But the other worry is that the information would be delivered at the same time to all the clients using that platform, and they would be making decisions based on it.
Well, if it was like machine trading, the machines would make the decision.
And we remember what happened because of that.
Yeah, that was a little destabilizing. And this
Yeah,
is the
it
same
was,
thing on a
yeah.
huge level with nobody making a decision, right? Nobody knows what's in these models.
Okay.
They just scrape stuff from the world. Anything that's out there.
Well, I'm glad that you noticed this. Who else noticed it?
I think it got mentioned in the Wall Street Journal in a small note that it seemed to have some stability issues. that needed to be thought about because it would be possible that it was coordinating the same activities inadvertently at many of these financial institutions simultaneously.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, keep your eye on that.
Yeah. Like I said, it was really kind of confusing, and then it stopped showing up in a 24-hour period in the news, which always makes me worry, maybe is this something not to worry about, or is it something it's really
to worry
big? Yeah. Okay, in other news, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, hit 3.3 in March, the highest level in over 2 years. Of course, consumer confidence has crashed. Interestingly, employment has remained stable. Now, they think that's because by removing immigrants, the number of people who have to get hired to keep it stable is lower than it used to be. In other words, as the labor force gets smaller, changes in employment require fewer folks. But the wage gains that the working people of America made over the 2 years have been erased in 2 months.
By the Consumer Price Index, by the price, yeah.
And, this is oil beginning to sneak through other consumer products. Gas prices, nationally, prices are over $4 a gallon, with premium grades exceeding $6 a gallon on the West Coast, probably for the foreseeable future because of the nonsense about the Straits of Hormuz and who's going to keep it closed. And, of course, a great deal of oil production infrastructure has been destroyed and will take time to repair. Ceasefire is fragile. There's still a few days left in it, but fighting continues in Lebanon. And it is very clear that the U.S. is the loser in this conflict. The Trump administration is really good at releasing photographs of U.S. military forces blowing things up. This seems to have convinced the commander-in-chief that the war is going well. This is deceptive. If the outcome of a war were determined by bombing, physical destruction, and the killing of innocents, then England and the Soviet Union would have lost World War II, and of course the U.S. would have defeated North Vietnam. Please note that England, the Soviet Union, and Vietnam were the actual victors in those conflicts. In war, stuff gets blown up. It's not necessarily decisive. So everyone except Trump realizes he lost the war with Iran. There's probably a few people around him who still believe they won it. The U.S. certainly has killed enough people and blew enough stuff up, and the Iranian people have suffered tremendously. But the regime has not been destabilized. Instead, it has consolidated its control over Iranian society. U.S. intervention has weakened the opposition to the theocratic regime within Iran. Iran has shown that, despite its military losses, it can still project power in the region quite effectively. And while not particularly effective or even potentially destructive, the missiles fired at Diego Garcia Base in the Indian Ocean did travel 4,000 miles and could inflict real, though not extensive, damage if they struck a highly populated urban center within that range, like London or Paris.
Those centers.
Yeah. They are. Now, the Iranians have no reason to make any concessions. And in fact, during the ceasefire, it's likely that they are receiving arms shipments from China and will extort payments from ships when the straits reopen, if the straits reopen. And there really isn't much left to blow up in Iran. So Trump's staff can re-show him the explosion videos that have replaced briefings on the conflict. Even Trump's chief of staff has apparently complained to his toadies about misleading Trump about the actual status of the conflict. On the important issue of the nuclear material, the material is still in Iran. It is as inaccessible to Iran as it is to the United States. If it's where U.S. intelligence seems to think it is, which is a dubious notion at best, if this weren't the case, they would have moved it after the last time we bombed this site. Indeed, probably currently the safest place in the world for this material is to leave it buried where it is in the absence of an international sophisticated effort to move it safely, and then the question of to where comes up. The talks failed, predictably. Trump's remaining options are ground troops to do what we can only guess, or returning to war crimes, which is what a blockade of the Straits of Hormuz is, or genocide. Despite Defense Department denials, support organizations report record numbers of queries and processes undertaken for separation from the U.S. military by active duty personnel. Even as the Secretary of Imbecility continues to fire the most experienced leaders in the U.S. military for what appears to be racist and sexist reasons, though reason seems to have little to do with these actions. As Trump continues to pursue his insane foreign policies, Republican candidates continue to suffer major setbacks, if not defeats, in the elections leading up to the midterm elections next fall. Additionally, the insane foreign conflicts and threats to do more by Trump, along with the continued increase in inflation, slowing of growth, negative growth in income, and chaos caused by his economic policies, have caused splits in MAGA. Though never underestimate the staying power of stupidity and cupidity.
That's true. I can add a little bit to that. I came across, as I'm sure many of our listeners did, the report by Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman in the New York Times. It's from their forthcoming book, Regime Change Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. And it's an account of Netanyahu pitching this war to Trump. So Netanyahu came into the Situation Room on February 11th, which strikes everyone as kind of weird. Why is a head of state coming into the Situation Room? I guess the only time we've ever really seen that is in Dr. Strangelove, when the ambassador from Russia is invited in. And if I recall correctly, he's particularly concerned about what food they're going to serve. At any rate, Netanyahu had people on Zoom from his minions to speak to that it would end Iran's ballistic missile program, which could be destroyed in a few weeks. So we know that didn't happen. The regime would be so weakened that it could not choke off the Strait of Hormuz. We know that didn't happen. And the likelihood that Iran would actually attack U.S. interests in the neighboring countries was absolutely minimal. Well, he should tell that to,
Yes, our allies in the region are not pleased.
No, they're not. They also presented a report that Mossad had intelligence that, with the help of Mossad, they would foment a rebellion in the streets against the regime, and Kurdish fighters crossing the border from Iraq would open a ground front in the northwest, which would stretch the regime's forces and accelerate the collapse. So in just a few days, all those wonders would happen. And of course, the president essentially seemed to make up his mind this would be a really good idea at that time.
Well, made up something.
Yeah, whatever substitutes for his mind. This article goes on to say that they had essentially made this same presentation to previous presidents who had basically said thank you and goodbye. Now, U.S. officials said that the first two objectives were achievable with American intelligence and military power. They said that the third and fourth parts of Mr. Netanyahu's pitch were detached from reality. That is, the possibility of the Kurds mounting a ground invasion of Iran. Just no. And the CIA director used one word to Trump to describe the Israeli prime minister's regime change scenarios, and it was farcical. Rubio then cut in and said, in other words, it's bullshit. And then General Kane, who seems to be a pretty straightforward guy, he's head of the Joint Chiefs. General Kane said, "Sir, this is, in my experience, standard operating procedure for the Israelis. They oversell, and their plans are not always well developed. They need us, and that's why they're hard selling." Trump went on in his usual disorganized way to talk about this, but evidently what many in the staff did not know is that there were continuing conversations about this as they began to deliberate over the following days. There were people like General Kane who warned Trump this was not going to be easy, and he also told him of the enormous difficulty of securing the Strait of Hormuz. But Trump remained convinced that the regime would collapse immediately and that they would be able to follow through with this quick plan.
I'm sorry, that's just so stupid.
I know, it is stupid. Trump has it in his brain that Iran is really deeply dangerous. And of course, he also had this pumped up pride in the U.S. military because they kidnapped Maduro. Even though Rubio said, I don't think this is going to work, his chief of staff, Ms. Wiles, had concern about what it would entail, but she just didn't want to get involved in, issues like foreign policy and war. Because, she's just chief of staff, which I take it means she's the hostess in the White House. And then, of course, Vance said he really didn't think it was
a good idea.
But he said he would support the president if the president decided to go forward with it. And, of course, he was warned that this could unleash regional chaos. So that's the insider scoop. I kind of wish they'd have published this before. But
yeah, this is tragic.
I do understand the problem for journalists, but still, it would have been nice to know. Meanwhile, the response among the punditry has been, our government is infiltrated with Israeli agents, and we need to purge them. This is all the fault of AIPAC, which, I'm not going to disagree with. AIPAC, the really right-wing Israeli lobby, and very dangerous. But you know what? It isn't Netanyahu. It isn't even AIPAC. It's Trump.
Yeah.
And nobody standing up to him to say, you cannot use the power of the United States military in this way. It's a Congress that refused to say this is a violation of the War Powers Act. In other words, okay, Netanyahu is not somebody I would have invited to Seder last week. Let's be honest. But to say, it's all his fault, it's all the fault of AIPAC, it's all the fault of these, secret agents embedded in our government, which sounds very McCarthyite.
I know that we're getting there. We're getting to this kind of paranoia that's a little disturbing.
Yeah. And so I urge everybody to read this article because it's vastly interesting. But I would carry away from it the information that when your safeguards don't work, you wind up with a deadly war that helps no one and that reduces American credibility around the world. Where was Congress? Why didn't the general say, if you're going to go through with this, I'm going to have to resign my position?
Yeah.
Why is the chief of staff saying, I just don't want to get involved? Hello, because there's more to do than polishing the silver in your job.
Oh, dear. Now the United States Navy is tasked with securing the Straits of Hormuz. There is no plan for demining it. There's no plan in place for who they're going to stop, who they're going to allow through, and how they're going to manage that. There are so many options for things to go terribly wrong.
Well, one of them is you have a meeting that goes on for 21 hours on day one of a ceasefire. And because you don't come to an agreement, you say, well, that failed? Hello? How long were we at the table with North Vietnam?
Years.
We spent a long time discussing the shape of the table. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to spend time negotiating. And it's clear their attitude was, I think on both sides, we really don't want to. Because if they wanted to, they would still be discussing this.
Interestingly, on Al Jazeera today, they had interviewed the Iranian negotiators who said things were actually moving along until they got to the nuclear issue.
Yeah.
And of course, Iran's position is, we signed all the relevant treaties. We said we wouldn't do this. We haven't done it. What more of a commitment do you need?
And you destroyed that agreement.
Yeah, you tore it up.
Yeah.
So, and that seemed to be the big sticking point.
There were some other things we were going to talk about. Oh, Hungary. That came out okay, didn't it? Or did it?
Well, it seems to have gone well. There were parliamentary elections, and the authoritarian strongman, now soon-to-be former Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, has conceded defeat. As Lionel Warren wrote in Bloomberg today, Putin's mouse is gone. That's terrible news for MAGA world. Orban was a strong ally and role model for our village idiot. The Tiaza party won a two-thirds majority in Hungary's parliament, which is sufficient to reverse the constitutional changes that were put in place to allow Orban's reign of error in his so-called illiberal democracy. Oddly, this is a center-right party led by a former Orban ally, Peter Magyar. And it seems to be an improvement, as he is committed to restoring the separation of powers and eliminating corruption, though his own past is not free of controversy. There is also an indication that he will strengthen Hungary's frayed European ties. Indeed, Poland, a longtime ally of Hungary, cheered the election results as good for Hungary, good for Poland, good for Europe, and said rude things about what it means for Putin to lose one of his major allies. Now the world will watch the path that the Tiaza party, led by Peter Magyar takes, this is a, center-right party to begin with, and he is a former ally of Orban.
Well, yeah,
But he seems to have been genuinely changed by the level of corruption that was going on, particularly in the judiciary and in the administration.
First of all, the platform he ran on, he now has to implement, right? That's one thing that the people of Hungary will watch for. The other thing is, this was a very peaceful transfer of power. And I have been so disturbed by the way that Trump people have just been currying favor with a dictator, that I'm very pleased that, and ultimately, nobody wanted to listen to Vance. By the way, did you see those really cringeworthy moments when Vance was addressing the good people of Hungary, and he had his phone out, and he was calling the White House so they could hear a message from Trump? Did you see this?
No.
He called the first time, no answer. He called the second time, no answer. So he just had to go on. It's really cringeworthy.
Whoa.
Yeah. He was kind of hung out to dry there.
Well, he took this job.
Yes.
He didn't have to get on the dance card. He could have done something differently. He had choices.
Well, they all did. Now, I am going to propose a change of subject matter because I am the media maven, and I wish to discuss Enshittification.
Oddly enough, that term, in light of what we've just done, is quite uplifting.
True that.
Man, go for it.
Okay. Our loyal listener can find an ad, it's actually a mockumentary, produced by the Norwegian Consumer Council a month ago on YouTube. And the title of it is Make It Shitty, A Day in the Life of an Enshittificator. And for those of you who want to know, that is spelled with 3 T's. You can call me an enshittificator, says a tall, husky, handsome man. My job is to make things shitty. What I do is take things that are perfectly fine and I make them worse. So we see the enshittificator cutting off the toe of a sock just as a man is putting them on, sawing off a bit of a leg at a dining room table while a seated family is having a meal, so the table now wiggles. One of my favorites, using a blow dryer to dry out the tip of a felt tip pen, and leaving a refrigerator door open.
Oh, horror of horrors.
Speaking to camera, wearing overalls stained with paint, he says he comes from a long line of people making things shitty, his father and his grandfather. He's looking through a photo album that shows a penny farthing bicycle. But he goes on to say, it is hard work, and it isn't very cost efficient to do it like this. I can only be in so many places at a time. So I needed a solution that frees up my time. And now we cut to him wearing a dark suit jacket over a tie-less white shirt, open at the collar. Quote, all of a sudden, I didn't have to move around to make things shitty. We see him in an office with his feet up on the table, typing on a computer. Quote, I could just sit in one place and make things shitty for way more people at the same time. Got a favorite website? Let's fill it with pop-ups. Preferably scam. Then we see primary school children dancing to a video in the classroom. Enjoying a video, he says, let's fill it with ad breaks. Then there's a close-up of the face of a digital phone with someone trying to install a program. Quote, you bought an expensive phone? Great, here's an update to make it shitty. Then he says, you have 1,000 pictures of a deceased mother. What do? I make you pay for it. He's now surrounded by men sitting at a conference table. He tells them first make it nice, then make it shitty. They chant and applaud. The first principle, he explains, is to make people dependent enough, then make it shitty. Speaking to a large, enthusiastic audience, he says, purchase a car online, then discover the optional add-ons like a radio, heating. Quote, now I have a shitty car, but I can't afford a new one. But what I can afford is a small monthly payment for these add-ons. In the very last scene, the Enshittificator is driving, wearing dark glasses, leather driving gloves, sounds of a horn honking. An automated voice comes over his digital phone. Braking is now a premium feature. Please enter your credit card number. The Enshittificator smiles evilly at the camera. Now, this ad, as I said, was made by the Have you seen this, by the way, on YouTube?
No.
It's great. You have to find it. The Norwegian Consumer Council, as I said, is an independent, governmentally funded organization that advocates for consumers' rights. And it pledges it should be easy for consumers to make sustainable choices every day. Consumers have the right to be protected against exploitation, both financially and digitally. To ensure this, we work to provide easy access to information, enforceable rights, and sufficient redress when something goes wrong. Okay, it'd be nice to have an active organization like that in America. Now, I became interested in where this notion of enshittification came from, and many listeners may already know this. It comes from a book by Cory Doctorow called Enshittification. He coined the word, Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It. Now, Doctorow has an online newsletter called pluralistic.net. He's the author of 30 books. Some of them are science fiction novels, some are essays, one is a picture book. He has received honorary doctorates from York University and the Open University in the UK, and numerous writing awards. He has had a visiting professorship and research appointments at MIT and the University of North Carolina. He had an A.D. White Professor at Large position at Cornell University, which is very prestigious, and the Open University, and he held an academic fellowship as Fulbright Chair at the Annenberg Center for Public Diplomacy at the University of Southern California. The really interesting thing about him is he dropped out of 4 universities. He attended what's called a SEED, S-E-E-D, secondary school in Toronto, which is the oldest alternative school in North America, and it's founded on the ideas of Jean Piaget and A.S. Neal's book, Summerhill, where students negotiate individual learning contracts. The important part of his career, I think, is that he was associated for 20 years with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which does campaigns to safeguard human rights online. He was an UN observer. He helped draft internet treaties. He lobbied in the US, Canada, Europe, and the UK. So he coins this term enshittification to describe the sudden onset collapse going on all around us. Just to show you, Bill, how a word can move around the world, the American Dialect Society named it its Word of the Year in 2023. Australia's Macquarie Dictionary named it its Word of the Year in 2024. The term is intended to explain the way an online service gets worse, how that worsening unfolds, and the contagion that's causing everything to get worse all at once. Now, this gets interesting when you go to the platforms that he's talking about, because it explains what's happening, but also why it's bad for us, the consumers, as well as for businesses. In stage 1, the platform is presented as very good to users. Facebook. Everybody loved it who was in college. In 2006, Facebook changed from a platform available only to those with a .edu email address, that is students and academics, to a platform available to all. Now this was his pitch. MySpace, quote, is owned by an evil, crapulent, senescent Australian billionaire named Rupert Murdoch, and he spies on you with every hour that God sends. Come to Facebook, where we will never spy on you. His promise was to connect users only with postings by those they have chosen to follow. Now, there are some terms that economists have invented to explain how online platforms work. One is called network effects. That is, a product or service gains more value as it attracts more users. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that the correct definition? Okay. Facebook was therefore made more valuable to the users as more users signed on.
Yep.
Online businesses also benefit from high switching costs. That's another term from your colleagues in economics. That's what a user would have to give up from switching from one product or service to another.
Right.
So to lower the switching costs on Facebook, the user has to convince all contacts to switch to, and then they have to convince all of their contacts. Now, economists call this the collective action problem, which means it's hard to get a group to decide what to do, when to do it, when you want them to do it. The high cost means users are locked into Facebook. Okay, so now Facebook's holding users hostage. This leads to stage 2. Stage 2 is when the platform becomes good to business customers, turning away from being good for the users. To increase the value to advertisers and publishers, Facebook had to reduce the value to its customers. Facebook offered to sell surveillance data, and remember, they did this without asking their customers, to provide targeted advertising, develop a large number of engineers to assure that the ads went to the targeted audience. That is, they promised to prevent ad fraud. Now, I would have thought ad fraud meant duping the clients, duping the customers.
Here's where the problem's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
The Facebook users aren't the customers. The advertisers are.
Precisely. That's what this changes.
Yeah.
That's the big change. They also told website publishers that if they posted links to Facebook, then Facebook would create a traffic funnel to the original site without the user's consent. Again, without telling their original subscribers. Ultimately, this meant that advertisers and publishers also became hostage to Facebook.
Same network effects.
Yes, stage 3, putting the screws to business customers, thus creating a giant pile of shit. And I hope our listeners will excuse our vulgarity, but, you know, these are the terms that have to be used. I don't know what other term we could use.
Poop.
Okay, poop. Sound like a 2-year-old. Now, here's how it happened. Over time, Facebook increased the fees to advertisers and took less care to assure that the ads were going to the preferred customers. That is, ad fraud went, to use his doctoral's words, wild. For example, in 2018, Procter & Gamble stopped paying Facebook a $200 million fee for access to subscribers, and they saw no decline in their sales. Now, this could be because Facebook was not sending their ads to the targeted customers, not sending their ads at all, or that online advertising really doesn't have much of an effect. One of the three.
Yeah, it depends on what the goods are. Procter & Gamble sells toothpaste, laundry detergent, consumer products like that people are going to buy anyway.
Yes. So, did they need Facebook?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Over time, Facebook required website publishers to publish longer and longer excerpts from their original material, and then prevented them from using a link. Now, by publishers, this might include what used to be very short texts or videos by charities, news organizations like Bloomberg, etc. Over time, Facebook reduced the quantity of content the user wanted to follow from designated contacts, which created digital space that they could drop paid advertisement or content into. And if you have a Facebook page and you look and you come across one of these little illustrations that tell you what a charity is doing, and you click on it, there's no longer any link.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Which means they're not paying enough. Now, all of the value surplus, is that the same thing as profit?
Yeah.
Okay. Is given to shareholders and executives, leaving the bare minimum Facebook calculates is necessary to keep their users hostage, and publishers and advertisers hostage to the users. Now, this depends upon sustaining the number of users. That is, if your friends depart, others depart too. In the first quarter of 2022, Facebook posted lower than expected user growth, and there was a mass sell-off of $250 billion worth of Facebook shares in 24 hours, a record-setting sell-off at that time. And I looked to see if there was any special trigger for this, and there wasn't. It was just the state of the economy at the time, and also the advent of competitors like TikTok. But there was a temporary sell-off during the Cambridge Analytica scandal, but it didn't last long. So what did Zuckerberg try to do? Well, the new economic term I will now introduce is called pivoting. He tried to do something different. He tried to develop the virtual world metaverse. He imagined that people would work, socialize, and live in virtual worlds. Well, the total losses of the metaverse division, called Reality Labs, amount to tens of billions of dollars. It has found a market in niche markets like gaming, fitness, where you exercise in a virtual world, and training and simulations for the military, medical, and corporate uses. So, Dr. O concludes, Facebook manages a, quote, shambling continuation. But, if you look at their stock prices, what's driving it, because they're up, is heavy investment in AI, which brings us back to the concerns you've been raising for the last 2 weeks. And that would result in the cost staying very high and the profits not catching up if this dream does not work.
There's some interesting and scary things associated with this. We're beginning to see AI services on the internet, AI companions. And people, particularly lonely people, sign up for this service, and it gives them an AI person to talk to. While there are many novels and things about this going off the rails, there was an interesting news piece yesterday where a middle-aged man who was lonely had one of these companions, and he was having ideational issues that were unhealthy. And in the messages, the AI companion was trying to bring him back to reality. It was not responding and reinforcing this, which is what the novels are about. But in fact, his responses to it kept driving it back in that dark region. And he's dead now.
He committed suicide.
Yeah. So, these are the products that are out there now. And maybe they generate revenue, but I'm not sure that's value added because it's really preying on people who probably should just have a therapist.
Who think that they're engaging with a supportive friend.
Well, they're imagining that.
Well, that's what I mean by think. I should have said imagining. Yeah.
I mean, it's a simulation. And, what they say in therapy is that all therapy works for the first 6 months because most people just benefit from having somebody listen to them.
Yeah.
But after that initial good result, then real therapy has to take place, and this thing just talks forever. So it depends on what services they come up with. I mean, Facebook is a mess.
Yes.
I use it to sort of keep track to see friends that I'm not in contact with if they're still alive. So it's sort of an anti-obituary for me. But most of the time I spend canceling ads because they're just a pest.
I get fewer and fewer actual contacts.
Yeah.
And more ads pushed at me for things I will never buy.
If it finds out you went shopping for someone else and it thinks it's you, you're going to get ads for women's pumps for the rest of your life. Actually, black flats, but don't buy clothing items for anyone over the age of 10 on the internet. Well, I must admit, one of the things I really do like about Facebook is it always reminds me when there's a new British mystery series out.
Oh, boy. Well, I will continue to explain the enshittification of Amazon, because that's another company that he wants us to pay attention to, until we can get to the point where he's explaining what we can do about all this. Yes. So anyway, I think he's an interesting person. I think it's an interesting book to read. And I do think it has larger implications than just the consumer economy, much larger. Now, did you want to say a few words about how you came upon the Lego propaganda?
Well, American politics seems to get discussed in my family more than most places, and I was talking to one of my daughters, who I will not ruin her life by mentioning her name on the podcast, but she made me aware of these Lego ads being produced by an Iranian propaganda organization, which is systematically trolling Trump. And what they are producing is Lego movie looking like videos of Trump going nuts when his plans run afoul in Iran, celebrating their victories, all to some pretty good rap music.
That's it. Yeah.
It's pretty well done, and it's very different from the propaganda that we've seen from the Iranian regime for the last 40 years. And I was looking at a interview with an Iranian woman who said, well, you killed all the old people, so now young people are making the propaganda.
I see. Oh, so, yuck.
It's like, okay. But in any case, they seem to be hitting the mark and infuriating our idiot-in-chief. They are telling the story of how Iran is responding to this. Yeah. They are letting stories out that the U.S. government has covered up, or it seems to be that that's what they're doing. And then they're also, obviously, the access to the internet is probably somewhat restricted in Iran, so that Iranian embassies around the world are trolling Trump on X and Truth Social pretty regularly. So he's getting a lot of nasty feedback.
Well, as a matter of fact, I have been looking at these propaganda videos which have dropped on YouTube, which I find interesting. YouTube, this is a very interesting war we're in, because in previous wars, all of the major mainstream corporations jumped to follow the lead of the government in preventing the transmission of ideas.
Everybody thinks the Lego movies are cute, right?
Yeah.
And so now you're taking that, and you're taking somebody who the vast majority of the American people don't like very much, right? And you're making fun of him in a way that ought to be happening on some place and only is happening on late night TV. So I think it's an extension of that. It's just feeding into the frustration of the American people and the disappointment about particularly the starting of this war. And it's revealing things to the American public that they suspect are true. They may or may not be. That's the nature of propaganda.
Yeah, I can agree with all of that.
But I think it's the cultural resonance, not the message, that gets people to watch it initially.
That's worth noting. Yeah. But I think I'd like to take a deeper dive into it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I watched it and I thought, well, this is pretty funny stuff. But I really didn't dive into the content.
Yeah, some of it is pretty brutal. But I'll go ahead and I'll take a look. And then I have to be schooled on this because I haven't seen the Lego movies.
They're pretty funny.
Okay.
They're cute.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good enough to know.
And, this is like having kittens talk about Donald Trump in a mean way. It's like...
There is the series on YouTube where the producer has made AI versions of Trump and the people around him as babies. Have you seen this?
No.
And then out of the mouths of babes comes the actual things that Trump and his advisors say. It's also charming because it's baby, even though they're, AI generated. But, I think we could look at both of those.
Yeah.
What makes that work? I wanted to say briefly another word about Whose God is on Our Side, Part 2.
Oh, yeah.
Because it really got absurd over the past week. One is that somebody in the Defense Department, highly placed, threatened, I put that in quotes that you can't see, if the Pope wasn't careful, America could recreate the papal schism. Now, the people that were made very happy by this are medievalist scholars.
Something to talk about.
Exactly. At last, my knowledge is relevant.
Oh, geez.
And so I commenced thinking, how are you going to go about creating a second pope, you silly ass? And then...
It's not like the first one has a full-time job.
It's just... And then I'm still so begeistered by a pope that speaks unaccented English, Chicago English. And so he made the statement, I'm not really afraid of Donald Trump. And I thought, no kidding. I mean, if anything goes without saying. But the interesting thing that did come out of what the Pope said about Jesus was a man of peace who freely gave himself as a sacrifice, is the explanation now by highly placed clergymen in both the universities and in the churches in the United States who are going out to say, this isn't a contest between Trump and the Pope. This is about morality. And the Pope is not interested in politics. He's interested in morality. And how does this become normalized? How do we get normalized to this kind of talk about destroying an entire civilization? Mm-hmm. And, I'm not usually somebody who tunes in with a careful ear to anything that somebody in the Catholic hierarchy has to say, but this is being very well done. It's very sobering. There's a great deal of gravitas. It moves it into a different linguistic domain, if you will, from where we've been trapped, which is a political argument.
And they did take down the image today.
Oh, Oh, the image that I must raise. If you missed it, sorry, I saved it. It's so awful. It's a picture of Trump as Jesus placing his hand upon a very sick-looking old man, I suppose healing him, while various healers look up to him in admiration. I mean, people like nurses. While behind him, F-16s are soaring across the sky. Totally disgusting. And was there such a backlash to this that they took it down?
I read that there was. I saw it for the first time this morning
Yeah.
when I perused Truth Social, and it's reposted by his supporters who are,
Nuts.
yeah, like Donald Trump's the second coming, and
Well, his spiritual advisor, who's a lunatic, she doesn't just compare him to Jesus. He is Jesus. Now, I will like to say right out loud, that's what the framers put the provisions for getting rid of a president in there for.
Yeah.
Right? He's clearly mad. He thinks he's a god. You have to take him somewhere quiet.
with lots of locks and padded walls.
And I know the Democrats do a lot of pearl snatching around their necks because, they can't impeach because of the majority in both houses going to the Republicans. And how can you invoke Article 25 when there's not enough people in Congress to form on both parties a way of inquiring into the mental health of the president? It's not good enough. If there was one thing the Democrats could do, it would be to organize a vote of censure against the president on a variety of issues, but one, invoking himself as Jesus or using language that would wipe out a civilization. Even if they couldn't get enough Republicans to join them, it would not matter.
We know that some people in Congress are making these arguments, but they're not. It hasn't reached a critical mass where the media has picked it up. It's got to be all of them.
Yes.
They all have to call out this Republican Party, this administration, and the lunatic in chief himself, and make those moral and ethical arguments based on principle. Not that they don't like the guy. Nobody likes the guy.
Yeah.
It's got to be, one, he's insane. Second, he has no moral compass and no capacity for ethical reasoning. He is a utility monster. He just wants, and he moves in whatever direction that will satisfy those particular urges at any moment in time.
A utility monster refers to an economic theory, does it not?
Well, it's an argument against utilitarianism. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The notion that Jeremy Bentham put forward was that, the common good was the greatest good for the greatest number, determined subjectively by the utility of whatever it was they were doing. And after about 2 decades of this, philosophers came up with the utility monster. An example would be Jeffrey Dahmer got so much utility from eating his neighbor's children, and they lost so little utility because they were nasty kids, that the greater good was by virtue of him eating all the children, and the parents should probably be providing the barbecue sauce. In other words, that's a utility monster, something that gets so much pleasure from the agony of others that it offsets the loss in utility of them. And Trump does this because his appetite for his own desires is so great that he is ignoring 300 million people's desire. Right?
Yes.
So he is the utility monster.
I love this example because the notion of the greatest good for the greatest number comes from Aristotle in his Politics. And what he was saying, he said it in Greek. I've read it in translation. Forgive me if he was saying, it's the greatest pizza for the greatest number. I don't read Greek. Stable politics is the greatest good for the greatest number over the longest period of time. Okay. But then he had to explain, or felt obliged to explain, well, what is happiness? And his argument was, some people think it's having a lot of money or material goods. Well, no, because that satisfies only for a small period of time, and the appetite for it is immense. His notion of happiness was really to live a quiet life and not to want anything, to be satisfied with yourself. Well, Jeremy Bentham forgot that part.
Yeah, I think it was John Stuart Mill who characterized his friend Jeremy Bentham as pushpin is as good as poetry, you know.
Exactly. And Jeremy Bentham, are they still displaying him once a year?
No, they display him all the time now. Jeremy Bentham, upon his death, left his estate to the University of London with some provisions that his body had to be stuffed and placed in a cabinet that would be in the room where their board of trustees or governors met, and that during those meetings, it would be opened up and his body would be there to remind them to follow utilitarian principles. Apparently, at a very early meeting, his head fell off, so they stuck it between his legs and put a plaster one on there, and then came to their senses and stuck it in the basement of the University of London Library, which was used for a bomb shelter during World War II.
Oh, that must have been fun.
And some poor woman came upon it and opened the door, and there was Jeremy smiling with his head between his legs. This was...
Oh, my God.
Is
this a true story?
Absolutely. Okay. Now, they didn't know what to do with old Jeremy, so finally they put him on display, right? And now they sell T-shirts and coffee mugs, and you can go see Jeremy. I think they've reattached the head. This guy was a full-tilt bozo. You know, I mean, he was not in his right mind. Yeah, utilitarianism sort of fell off the planet pretty quickly because of these arguments that utility was not a measure of the good, only to be restored by mainstream economics.
Exactly.
When they moved away from the labor theory of value that the classical political economists used to measure value to the utility theory of value, saying that whatever consumers wanted was good by virtue of the fact that they wanted it.
And that's
that resurrected what should have been a dead philosophy.
And that was the principle used to change during the Reagan administration the definition of the role of broadcasting licenses.
Yeah.
That if you were going to get a license to use the public airwaves, you had to offer public service programming that served the common good. That's how we got news and documentaries. Well, when you change the definition to mean, well, who's ever watching or listening on broadcast radio or watching on television a program that tells you, according to utility theory, that it's serving the greater good. Mm-hmm. And that's how we all wound up with the hot mess that we have now.
Well, you know, Fox News makes people happy.
Yeah.
And it sells a lot of products, by the way.
Yeah, but they're the products that people my age are supposed to use because we're in a declining state of vitality.
Well, a declining state of intelligence is probably a prerequisite for that, too.
Exactly. Now,
how soon before we're watching Fox News?
Never. So, do you want to hear my nominee for the best headline ever?
Yes.
Okay, here it is. Charlie Kirk's mentor, Jeff Webb, the father of modern cheerleading, dies in freak pickleball accident.
Oh, man.
Isn't that great? It's people.com. Now, there were other outlets that carried it, obviously. Yahoo, Associated Press affiliates, various places carried it, but nobody had this headline, which I think is marvelous. Charlie Kirk's mentor, Jeff Webb, the father of modern cheerleading, dies in freak pickleball accident. Whoever wrote that, I'm obliged to him or her for a long time. And the accident was he fell down and hit his head and never got up again.
Yeah, well, that's definitely not an on purpose.
Yeah, But the fact that they called it a freak pickleball, I mean, those two things don't usually go together. And he was an older man. I mean, there's no question about it, but Lord, and also the father of modern cheerleading, that's got to cause a pause.
I can't wait to see the funeral. I just see all these fundamentalist Christian cheerleaders, you know.
Evangelical cheerleaders. You're right.
Oh, my
I gotta
God.
see that.
You know, you couldn't make this stuff up.
No.
Jeepers.
But in a dark world, it's nice to have just a little bit of something. That's a little bit funny.
Oh, man. That's more than a little bit funny. That's just weird funny.
I knew you'd get a kick out of it. That's why I didn't tell you what it was in advance.
We laughed through the whole show.
I just wanted you to be surprised. Well, folks, that just about winds up what we have time to say. There's a lot more to say, but we hope that you find some laughter and joy in the coming days. We'll be back in a week, and, spring is here. It's the best we can say.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye. Till next
Bye-bye.